Before I can get around to doing any more electronics, I've got some serious issues with my little soldering station, and we need to get them fixed before we go any further. I'll just run you through what they are. Not in any particular order, there are 5 of them in total. The first one I'm going to talk about is this one, the soldering iron connector. The cable's pulled out from there, and that needs to be fixed. I've tried it once before, didn't work for very long and pulled out again. Now, my soldering iron does get a lot of abuse and travels about all over the place, so it's not unusual to get this sort of problem. The second issue is at the back, and it's really a very serious one. It's a bit like the soldering iron problem, but this cable does not fit happily in this grommet. In fact, this grommet needs to be either bigger or the cable needs to be smaller. If we continue on using it like this, it's going to get wrapped around and the insulation is going to break down, we're going to get short out, and we're going to end up with a welding machine. It'll be quite spectacular. As the third problem associated with that lead is that the fuse cover is missing. I don't know where that fell out, but I think it's lying around on the floor indoors somewhere. I know I've seen it. Right, there are 2 other issues. The soldering iron. Now, this is not an obvious one, in that when it goes to sleep, it doesn't wake up again. And we have to sort of adjust the temperature to make it wake up. That's something internal to this box. And the other one is the hot air gun. When we pick it up out of its holder, that doesn't work, it doesn't switch on, and there's a fault with that. Equally well, when I do get it to start blowing, putting it back in its holder, the temperature doesn't switch off. So again, hot air being blown out of this end all the time. Now that's going to be internal to this. The best way forward is for me to take it apart, and as with everything, you just remove as many of the screws as you can and find out what needs to come apart. So let's disconnect the soldering iron first. Get that out of the way. And I'm going to take the hot air gun off. Oops. Put those out of my way. There seems to be about 4 screws in this thing on the front and 4 screws on the back. A couple on the side there and a couple on the side there. So we're just going to take it apart and see what happens. First of all, we'll remove the front ones. It's about time this thing had a really good overall. And as we're going to have a load of screws, I'll go back to my old and trusted methods. And hopefully we don't lose any. Take the cover off. And there's all the bits. That's a sort of a slight burnty smell about things. Maybe from the transformer, or from the board, not sure. Excuse me sniffing. More from the transformer. Now, before I dive into looking at this circuit, it's going to be time consuming. But one of my 5 problems was with the air gun. It wasn't being detected to start it up and switch it off when I was removing it from the holder. Now, that may be a problem on the board, but how does this thing detect that it's being lifted and moved around? And the secret lies in this little device here, which is the holder for the thing. So we slot it in like so. What is it about this thing that makes this work? And what I think there's some magnets inside here, permanent magnets, and inside here is a Hall effect device that probably detects when this is being removed and placed in its holder. Before I really get stuck into any sort of fault finding proper, there's one theory that holds up, is to always check your connectors. And I don't really want to open this up if I don't want no need. I don't really want to go looking in here if there's no need. So I'm going to check the wiring in this connector first to make sure that all is okay. They do get flexed around, and that's where most of the problems may lay. Yep. Get that one out. Don't lose it. This just may be our lucky day. I'm going to zoom in and see if I can show it to you. This blue wire is detached from that pin there. Now, the dilemma is, have I got another soldering iron that I can use to resolder that joint before I put it back together? Sadly, I've now got to leave it because there's other things to do and time's rolling on. Well, it really is a nuisance. I don't like these sort of plugs in any case, but I'm going to pull that wire out from there. And it's going to be a difficult job to sort of get extra wire to terminate it. Do a sort of a temporary bodge to get it working. Or do I resolder all of the leads, cut them all to length and resolder them all again? Instinct tells me not to look for trouble, and I'm going to just nip a little bit off the end and I suppose a bit more. There you go. And try doing a sort of a temporary repair. Now, if there's any strain on this, it'll be this one that breaks again, and if it breaks again, we'll have to redo the lot. Let's see if we can get it over. I personally don't think this is going to be very successful, but we can see. We can but try, as the saying goes. perhaps the first thing to do is to tin these wires to stop them from splaying apart. I think that's what we do. Now this old soldering iron comes from radio spares. It came about, I don't know when I bought this, probably about 1980. It's gas fired. There's a platinum screen inside and it glows. The gas burns inside there, causing the heat. It's adjustable at the end. You can sort of turn the heat up, turn the wick up, or turn it down according to what you fancy, and you fill it from the bottom. I presume they still make things like this. Unfortunately, the flint that was in here, like the old flint lighters, is no longer functional, so I'm going to have to go and light it elsewhere. Well, you probably can't see it glowing in there, but it is. And we'll see if we have the solder's ready to melt. I haven't used this thing for at least, although I bought it in 1980, I probably haven't used it. In fact, I would say that I haven't used it since about 1990. In fact, it still works. It's a miracle. But that's gas for you. Let's. I'll be blowed if I'm going to go out and buy a new soldering iron just to do this job. I bought this to sort of carry around with me in my pocket, and if you're out camping or things like I used to do, being outdoor, you know, a lot of outdoor life, if anything goes wrong with the electrics, you've got something you can use to help solve your problems. Now that was the switch, and I just switched it off. It's got a cool down now. Could do with a little stand to hold it in. I'll think about that. Might make something. Well, it's proved its use. Let's put this back together if we can. Well, I managed to get it out again. That was a bit of a fight, and I'm now going to put a wee smidge of silicone grease around the plastic here, because I'm having trouble sliding it over the metal bit. I've also pressed some of the pins in a bit so they don't stick out. When I say pressed in, I mean squeezed them in so that they're not pressing up against the side of this metal tube. Let's line up the holes. I hope this is the final time, because I'm getting fed up with this. How the hell did it ever go together? Ah, we're in. And I think the holes are lined up. That was my box of tricks. There's a tiny little screw goes in there. I think this screwdriver is going to be too big for it. Yeah, totally too big, got to get another one. That's in. That's too small. What on earth is it? Well, that little screw head is completely wallowed out. It's I don't think we're going to be able to screw it up again. Right. This one is nice and crisp. This one isn't. Now, I either did it when I took it apart, or alternatively it was already like it, and I got a feeling that it was already like it. So the trick here is to do this one up as far as it'll go. Right, and then we'll do this one up tight, and that'll clamp up on the cable, or should do. And that's up as tight as it'll go, so I expect this will pull out and the leads will break off again at some time in the future, but we'll deal with that problem another day. Now, have I cured the problem with this? I won't know until we've looked at the rest of the soldering iron and put it back together. I'm getting a bit cluttered here, so I'll clean up a little bit. The next problem is the soldering iron, and these leads have all pulled out of here, as you can see. Same problem that we're always going to have with this sort of thing. And the iron itself, although it's going up to temperature, and we put it back into the soldering iron station when it's at rest, it cools down to sort of a silent temperature, which is about 200 degrees centigrade, and then when you pick it up and start soldering again, the temperature goes up to whatever you set it to, and that is not functioning. And to get that to function, I have to press the button on the front of the soldering station. I suspect a wire's come off in the connector. We're going to have a look at that now. Same procedure as before with the other one. However, these two screws are perfectly okay. And I'll put them in there, keep them out of the way. That does not fit. Where'd it go? Don't move. Oh, there it is. Little screw in there. Clip the lid down. We've got to forget about that now for a while. Pull this one out. Oh dear. Well, if they're not good, they all look good. So the problem doesn't seem to be in the connector. Is it in the soldering station itself, which means to say it can be an electronic problem. And I'll now have a quick brief visual look at the inside of that thing and see what's going on there. And before I put this back together. Right, okay. Yeah. There's a wire that's cut off short just there. Don't know why. They probably made the wiring form up and then cut off what they didn't want. But weird. Let's see if there's any loose wires dangling around. You can see what they've done. They've actually cut this wire off here because it's redundant, not used, and took the other piece of the wire around and put it on a earth terminal here. So that's the other part of that wire, because the rest of that wire goes away to the connector. It comes up to this connector, two wires come off, go into there, to this one, and the third wire that was in the bunch goes off and is taken down to chassis earth. I really do need to get a meter on to make sure that there's continuity between the pins on here and where these wires go to for that connector. Once I'm satisfied that everything's okay, then we'll put it all back together and proceed from there. But before we can do all of that, there's one major sort of problem that needs to be urgently addressed because it is positively dangerous. This is the back panel, and this is the mains lead, and this grommet here should clamp round the cable, and it's pulled away before, and I've tried my best to sort of repair it by taking the grommet out, and it was all in there. However, it's all got pulled away again, pulled right out. The grommet for the hole and the cable is basically the wrong size. The cable does not fit the grommet well. I'm going to replace it with one of these. It's caused me nothing but hassle. I don't like it. The cable is of poor quality in that it seems to go stiff with time. It may not be that bad, I don't know, but it's just cumbersome, horrible. So I'm going to put this socket on the back. Now there's a problem, and the problem is, have I got enough space? Will I have enough space behind the transformer to sort of terminate the socket? Now, to give me a little bit of extra space, I've made a little, let's move that over a bit, I've made a little sort of spacer up really, that slides onto the back of the connector, and I 3D printed that. That gives me an extra 1/4 inch, and that gives me a little bit more room behind here so that we don't not butting up or banging against anything like metalwork of the transformer. Now let's get on with that. There's only one way we can do that as far as I'm concerned, and that is to, yeah, let's do the sensible thing, get rid of it. I've been wanting to do that for ages. You can probably tell. Pull that off. Oh, if I pull the wires through, if I can, make life a bit easier. Okay. That's right, that's right. Now, oh, come straight out that way. Right, that's the end of that horrid thing. Honestly, this was just all too small for the cable. Useless. Well, I'm trying to be as accurate as possible, which doesn't always work. Right, okay. Looks like I've got some lines to work to, and from here on I think there's going to be a lot of heartache with the file and cutting and God knows what, and it's going to be a nightmare. Something I don't like doing, so let's get this job out of the way. Sometimes the things you make come in handy, and this is a helping hands press for paper punches that I made for the boss, and she's out so she can't see me using it. Hey, I'm through. That's good. Job done. That helped. Right, I should have two nice holes now. I did one earlier. Let's oh yeah, try that out. Alright, all in all, that's working really fine. Well, it all fits together quite nicely. All the holes line up nicely, except that I've made a mistake. The trim that goes around the outside edge won't fit because the connector is too near the edge there, and I can get around that by cutting out a section of that, which I'll do later. Shame, but that's what happens when you're modifying things and don't know what you're doing. This is a Soldering iron, probably the first soldering iron I ever had when I was about 14. Not this particular one, because this is dates from again about 1975. But they take about half hour to warm up, and absolutely no use. I think it's only 25 watts at that, but we'll see. One thing for sure, I'm going to have to buy a new soldering iron for backup, because this is ridiculous. I'll just pause it here while I go away, have a cup of tea, come back and see if the iron's got up. I've just tried it out on these, and it's pretty good for this sort of stuff. But of course it should be, because this is the sort of size of stuff I started out soldering when I was a boy, and oh god, it's so much easier. Oh well, I won't throw that away. Oh, we've got one more joint to do, so we'll keep that on, and hopefully we don't burn anything. That's the only problem with these, is that you have to sort of hang them up somewhere. Lovely. Let's see if the other side's okay. Yeah, perfect. Pleased. Result. Must switch it off, must let it cool down, and hopefully where it says neutral on the plug here, that this is the neutral lead, because it's the blue wire that came off of the cable that we had to plug on, and this green and yellow wire goes the same stuff in the cable to the plug, and that sort of meant to be brown but looks pink. Wire should be live now. So, now in theory I shouldn't really do things like this. Now let's start off. The gun's plugged in, it's in its cradle, there's magnets in there, so it should be off. I've already got it switched on. I think it'd be a bit safer from the point of view of plugging it. I've got 3 bars up. I put the air onto about 5. Now when I pick it up it should start, and it hasn't been doing that for some time, and I've had to jiggle about with it to get it to go, and it's worked, and it's really get a pain. But now let's see. Hooray! Pick it up straight away, and it worked. And it stopped when I put it back. So I want to set the temperature. So let's set the temperature to, I'm setting the temperature to about 250. It's starting. It's heating up. Yep. Put it in a cradle. I'm sorry you can't see all this working because the way it's sitting on the table here. It's cooling. Oh blimey, that's dangerous. It's got to watch out where the hot air's blowing out of this thing, because it is hot air, and it's cooling down. It's got down to about 120 now. When it gets to 100, the fan will switch off. Good. So it was the wire in the connector that's stopping the hot air gun from working. Now before I can put any of this, I'm not going to put any of this back together because we've got to look at the soldering iron and fiddle about with this, and I'm not so sure there's any faults on the soldering iron. So before we go any further forward with this, I have to get all this out of the way and redo this. So I'm going to stop there. I'm really getting desperate to put the soldering iron station back together. I need it, and I certainly haven't addressed the issues that I have with the soldering iron part, but I think the hot air's done and dusted, and we've fixed the main sleeve problem. I've unplugged this little connector here which goes to the soldering iron socket, and because we've got all these sleeves over the pin connectors, it's difficult to judge whether there's any breakages between those at all. So I'm just going to buzz that out. That one's okay. Next one. That's okay. Middle pin is not used. Next pin. It's okay. Make sure I've got a good connector. That pin's okay. So all the sleeved wires to this connector are okay. There's one other sleeved wire that goes away to an earth connection, and we'll check that out. I think that's the middle pin. Cool. Yeah, that's okay. I'm left with one that's been soldered on without having a sleeve on it, and it goes away underneath the printed circuit board and looks like it connects up somewhere near let's see if we can get it. This integrated circuit, and probably some form of sense wire. I'm not going to fiddle about with it. I'm just going to hope that it's okay. Although that may be the problem why my soldering iron is not performing exactly as it should do. But I do really need it back in service, and I'm going to have to live with that. And till I've got time to fix it another day. I've had to push on the repair of the soldering iron station without doing any more video recording because I needed it urgently. The exposed wires that came from the connector of the soldering iron, because they weren't broken, I decided the easiest thing to do was to make up a small sleeve which composed of 2 halves and a little bit of glue, put them together over the wires and then clamped it inside of the shell of the connector. This has nothing to do with the problem of the soldering iron not coming on again from its sleep mode. However, we'll have to live with that for the time being, and we'll see if it works or how it goes when I switch it on in a moment. I have screwed the soldering iron station back together. It's just a straightforward job of putting the screws in and probably not worth filming. However, as you can see, I now have a plug and socket on the back as opposed to having a cable which went into the soldering iron. Now, is it necessary? No, but it aggravated me and I prefer to have it like it is now, which makes it a lot easier for me to pack this away. And I have to because I don't really have anywhere to put this up permanently. Right, ready for the big switch on. Okay. The soldering iron is coming up to temperature. It's got to 250 degrees, we've got it set. Take a brief look at the hot air gun. Let's just leave it there at 216. Pick it up. Yes. Hopefully we can hear it starting. And it is blowing out hot air. Put it back in the holder. It's cooling down, and at 100 degrees it'll switch off. Good. So fixing the broken wire in this connector did the trick in repairing that. There is a moral there, and that is to check the connectors for any broken wires before you disassemble anything. That way you might save yourself a bit of time. I'm hoping in a minute or two the soldering iron will go to sleep and I'll have to leave it in its holder and come back to that. I'll leave the video running. 10 minutes of nothing. I have no idea how long it's been asleep. When I take it out of the holder, it should start up. I think it senses that it requires to send more power to keep the temperature. And it says then, oh, I'm being used, and therefore starts up. And there we go. So, I've cured that problem, but I don't know how. But when I had this apart, we did check the continuity of the soldering iron connector to the board, and at one point I did undo one of the internal connectors, and I suspect it was a HR, that's a high resistance, of the connector, and just reseating the connector has cured the problem. So that brings me to an end on this, and I hope you don't have similar problems. So just to recap, check your connectors first, and if the cable at the back don't ever let the outside insulation pull out to expose the mains wires behind. I've overcome that problem by fitting the connector.